How to build a Blackgates Sweet Pea 5-inch gauge locomotive, part 54. Completing the fitting of the first footplate. Before moving on to the other side, I mark out the hole positions for the sidebar. The chassis paintwork is looking quite good in this area because I painted it in the previous episode, and also the bars are looking good too. All we'll need to do when everything's assembled is paint the actual nuts and bolts. I can spray the inside of the frames without any problems whatsoever. But on this side it's more difficult because the reversing stand support is under there, and I was thinking about leaving that in gunmetal. It's very important to make sure that these 4BA bolts are tight. But don't overdo it, it really is very easy to shear off 4BA bolts. I've sheared off quite a few in my time, so now I am extra careful not to do that. Notice that I've fitted washers to the bolts before the nuts. This is to stop the nuts from scraping the paintwork. Not entirely necessary, but I thought it was a good idea. For tightening, I'm using my socket screwdriver on the head of the bolt, and the nut spinner on the other side with my scriber through the hole makes sure I can get plenty of torque on the bolts, but not too much as to shear them off. Time now for a test fit of the top plate, and it seems to fit quite well. The good news is all of the holes in the plate line up perfectly with the holes in the bars. For some reason I forgot to thread the two inner holes of the bar, and I thought I would quickly do that before going on to the next stage, which proved to be a big mistake. The words tapping and quickly don't go together very well. To my surprise, the tap snapped off. That will teach me not to rush jobs. Luckily, the tap snapped off well away from the hole, so it was a very simple job to use a pair of pliers and remove it. Thinking back, this tap was not very good to start with. It's one of a load of taps that I picked up in a scrapyard about 50 years ago, so it wasn't very sharp to start with, and I should have known better, but you live and learn. If this tap had snapped off down in the hole, I would have had to start again with a new piece of bar. As I've just mentioned, it was very easy to extract the broken bit using a big pair of pliers. I did wonder, when I was screwing the countersunk bolts into the holes, why they were tight. It was just bad luck picking a blunt tap out of my box of taps. I re-tapped all of the holes with a much sharper tap, and the job was much improved. The general rule is, if you thread a hole 4BA and use a 4BA bolt, it should go into the hole, not be a slack fit and not be a tight fit, it should be just right. And even though this shouldn't happen, the new tap was sharp, so it removed a little bit more metal from the hole, and I got very clean threads. As before, I used some cutting lubricant just to make things a bit easier. In this clip you can clearly see that the tap is cutting the existing thread because of the amount of swarf coming out of the hole. Here's a quick tip: when you're threading holes in pieces of metal, it's 3 turns in and 1 turn out to clear the swarf. If you carry on screwing the tap into the hole, when you try and clear the swarf, you're very likely to snap off the tap. Now it's far easier to screw in the countersunk machine screws. This is altogether much better than the first time when I screwed the plate down onto the bearers. There is a problem, and this warrants a top tip time which I'll show you very shortly. These countersunk 4BA bolts are a perfect fit in the countersinks in the plate, but I don't want this to be the case. They are not fitting properly into the countersinks in the metal plate, so now it's top tip time. These metal plates are quite thin, and the problem is why the countersinks are not seating in the holes properly is because the metal is too thin. A simple fix: slightly countersink the holes in the bearers. By doing this you can screw the bolts in slightly more. By now the bench is full of pieces of swarf which are nasty and sharp, so I'm blowing them out of the way with my airline. When blowing swarf away with an airline, it's really important to wear eye protection. You have been warned. I speak from experience. To complete the job at this side of the chassis, I need to refit the reverser support bracket. This is fitted using 4 metric Allen bolts with corresponding nuts and washers on the inside. The bracket is a good fit but needs a little bit of persuasion to level it using a soft hammer. Now it's more or less perfect. The footplates at each side need to be perfectly flat, and they can't be flat if the reversing bracket is in the wrong place. In this clip you can see that the countersunk bolts are slightly deeper in the countersinks in the metal plate than they were originally. This is not essential, but it looks better in my opinion and gives somewhere for the paint to run. To strengthen the footplates, I'm going to use pieces of bar like this at each side. Here, with the piece of bar on top of the footplate, I'm marking the position of it. At this stage it's very easy to become confused. What I'm doing here is making sure that the holes are in line with the other ones at the top. I'm using a set square for this. That is not the issue and causes no confusion, but it's very easy to forget that the other marks that you've made on the line are not where you need to drill the holes. You need to measure the distance between the main line and the edge of the piece of steel plate, and at the halfway point make another mark. This is where you need to drill the holes, which will then be in the centre of the bar that will fit underneath. Simple but easy to overlook. Here I'm demonstrating this with the bar in position. At this stage I wanted to get a camera shot of the reverser bracket underneath the footplate, but the image wasn't very good because it's dark under there. The solution is to prop up the chassis using one of these excellent large spring clamps, and then I could get quite a good shot with the camera from the underside. Once again in this episode, it's top tip time. To clean pieces of metal, I find this to be a very useful tool. It's an orbital sander. I can fit it with sandpaper of various grades, or I can fit it with a piece of Scotch-Brite like this. You must never attempt to paint pieces of metal just as they come when you buy them. You always need to rough them up a bit so as to give a good key for the paint. In this final clip of this episode, I'm just checking that all the marking outlines are in the right place. And that's it for this one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.